A simple note unveils an astonishing, everlasting love. Gray clouds hung heavy over the suburban cemetery, a muted palette that mirrored John's hollow chest as he approached. The gravel crunched beneath his worn boots, a brittle sound swallowed quickly by the damp air. The cold seeped through his threadbare, paint-splattered sweater, biting at his skin, but the chill in his bones ran deeper still. Around him, the graves stood in quiet rows like silent sentinels guarding the shattered fragments of his life. His trembling hand hovered over the cold stone, the carved letters of her name blurring through a fog of tears. He knelt, the damp earth pressing unyieldingly against his knees, and for the first time, the ache of solitude wrapped itself in stark reality. A whispered breeze stirred dead leaves, their brittle rustling a fragile echo of the laughter now lost. A sudden weight pressed lightly on his shoulder. He turned slowly, eyes searching for relief only to meet the imploring gaze of his old dog, Max. The dog's coat was dusted with autumn dirt, its eyes bright but tempered with the same grief seeping through John's soul. John's lips quivered. "Max. I'm so lost," he choked out, face burying into the dog's soft fur. The world felt vacant, a hollow echo chamber of memories that refused to fade. As he stood, readying to leave, something caught the edge of his eye, a scrap of paper fluttering beneath the gravestone's base. Max looked fixedly, tail low, then gently nosed the note forward. John's heart stumbled, suspicion mixing with intrigue as he bent to retrieve it. The paper was weathered, edges frayed, and in a sharply scrawled script, letters hovered suspiciously familiar. "John, I'm still here," it read. The signature beneath was a paw print, unmistakably Max's, his constant companion and silent guardian. John stared down at the note, disbelief twisting his face. This can't be real. His breath hitched, the harsh winds outside swirling shadows across the gravestone. A peal of distant thunder rumbled low, as if the sky itself murmured warnings. Max looked up, eyes shining with something almost human, urgent, patient. John's gaze drifted from the note to the peaceful stone, the past and present colliding in the gray light. "Why now?" he whispered, the words carried away on the chill wind. The dog nudged his hand, a soft, steadying comfort amid the tempest inside. Behind him, the cemetery stretched endlessly, a place of endings and beginnings, where grief clung like morning mist. The note was a flicker in the dim expanse, a spark in the cavern of loss. John's eyes filled as a sudden, fragile breath of hope grazed the edges of despair. The note lied heavily in his palm, a cryptic tether linking him to a mystery too intimate, too tender to ignore. He unfolded the paper again, tracing the inked paw print, his fingers trembling as the world around him blurred and shifted, caught between the unbearable weight of loss and the dizzying possibility of connection beyond death. The sky cracked open with a flash, rain beginning to fall in soft, insistent drops, each one a rhythm of renewal, urgent, solemn, and irrevocable. John looked down once more, a mixture of confusion, sorrow, and strange comfort blossoming within him. The note, the gravestone, the dog, all threads weaving into a tapestry he could barely begin to understand. The camera lingers on John's face, raw and vulnerable, as the rain blurs the world into watercolor, a moment suspended between ruin and the whisper of unseen hope. The door to his small, cluttered studio creaked softly as John stepped inside, the late afternoon light filtering weakly through paint-streaked windows. The air was thick with the scent of turpentine and drying oil, mingling uneasily with damp earth and old grief. His sneakers whispered on the wooden floorboards, worn thin by years of solitary pacing. His hands, stained deep with colors that couldn't heal, clutched the crumpled note from the cemetery. The faded paw print mocked him in the dim light, a puzzle posed by a silent companion now reduced to a whisper on paper. He paced, the note fluttering like a fragile lifeline between despair and disbelief. John's eyes darted around the room, landing on the half-finished canvas that bled with dark hues and chaotic strokes, a tempest trapped behind stretched fabric. It was an echo of his soul, unsettled, raw, unfinished. The bristles of his brush rested untouched, dust gathering like the quiet that had become his constant company. He sank heavily into an old chair, the leather cracked and worn, the comfort thin and brief. His gaze fell again to the note, disbelief warred with a strange yearning. The dog's paw print was absurd, impossible. Yet, here in this moment, impossibility seemed the only thread tethering him to a faint hope against the crushing certainty of absence. Memories seeped in her smile beneath the pale kitchen light, the softness of her voice tangled with laughter, moments sharp and distant as fractured glass. His chest tightened, each breath a battle between grief's weight and the stubborn flicker of yearning. The room was silent but for the distant hum of passing cars beyond the walls, a world moving forward despite his stillness. A sudden guttural growl escaped from Max curled at his feet, a low sound thick with urgency and loyalty. John's fingers twitched, a fierce ache in his throat. "Max," he ventured, his voice cracking, can there really be? His words trailed off, swallowed by the dusk's encroaching silence. The note felt heavier now, charged with unspoken truths and unseen paths. He pushed himself up, the chair scraping harshly against wood, discordant in the stillness. Moving to his easel, his eyes locked with the unfinished painting, a maelstrom of dark strokes yearning for light, much like himself. John took a brush, trembling. The bristles met canvas, tentative at first, then surging with restrained force. Colors bled and blended, textures rising and merging, a silent scream etched in pigment. The note remained pinned nearby, a silent witness to his tumult. Minutes slipped and stretched as the world outside dimmed. Shadows pooled in corners, yet bursts of vibrant color bloomed under his handsan and spoken promise teased from chaos. He paused, heart pounding against his ribs, eyes flickering back to the note. Questions flared: was this a cruel joke or a secret bridge? Doubts clawed with merciless tenacity. Hope, fragile as a candle flame in the wind. A faint sound stirred, a soft scratch, a whisper of movement at the door. John's breath caught. Max lifted his head slowly, ears pricked, eyes bright as embers in the shifting gloom. The house, the note, the dog, everything converged in a moment suspended between disbelief and yearning. John's lips parted, voice barely a whisper, maybe this is the sign. Outside, night folded in, a velvet curtain drawn tight against the weight of loss, yet somewhere beyond the darkness, the smallest spark flickered, tentative, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The night pressed close around John's small home, the streetlights casting long, wavering shadows that flickered like tentative promises through rain's streaked windows. His fingers carried the note, folded and creased, like a fragile lifeline tossed into a stormy seabath, absurd and precious. Each breath he drew was thick with hesitation, the weight of disbelief mingling with a flicker of desperate hope. The studio felt both sanctuary and prison. Canvases leaned like silent witnesses against every wall, blank and unfinished, mirrors of a fractured soul. John's gaze lingered on the half-painted portrait of his wife. Her eyes, so vivid yet shadowed by loss, seemed to watch him through the twilight of his grief. He paced, the legacy of silence and unspoken truths vibrating in every step. The note in his pocket burned against his skin, a symbol of the impossible and the unseen connections that refused to unravel. Outside, Max nudged the door, his eyes reflecting the dim light with unwavering loyalty. In that silent gaze, John felt the spark of a bond that transcended the sharp edges of absence. Drawing a broken breath, John retrieved his coat, stepping into the moist night air. The fog had settled thick and heavy, curling around street lamps like phantom fingers reaching for the warmth of belonging. The cemetery lay ahead, a solemn embrace of stone and shadow, where silence held secrets deeper than the graves themselves. As he neared the gravestone, a gust swept fallen leaves in swirling arabesques, the music of the earth whispering forgotten stories. Near the base, another note trembled in the cold earth, half-buried and beckoning. John reached down, heart pounding, the soft glow of a street lamp illuminating the familiar scrawl. "Look deeper," it read, the paw print signature stark and impossible. His hands trembled, and a lone tear pooled at the corner of his eye, not merely for loss, but for the fragile thread stretched taut between despair and the dawn of understanding. Max sat beside him, silent sentinel, as the rain faded to a gentle drizzle, each drop like a soft tear of the sky falling onto the grieving earth. John's breath steadied, the ache coiling into determination. Against the cold and uncertainty, a resolute spark kindled a fragile beacon that whispered of hidden truths and the faint possibility of healing. He looked to the gravestone once more, the carved name framed by droplets of rain that gleamed like tiny fragments of light. The world held its breath alongside him, the night poised at the edge of revelation. With steady hands, John rose, gripping Max's collar, his eyes scanning the horizon beyond the mist and shadows. "We'll find the truth together," he murmured, a vow wrapped in the quiet symphony of falling rain. And as the first hint of dawn bled into the horizon, a flicker of pink and gold cutting through the lingering darkness, John stepped forward, guided by love's unseen hand into the growing light of hope. The morning fog clung low over the cemetery, tendrils weaving through aged oaks and settling upon the gravestones like whispered secrets. John's boots crunched softly on the dew-soaked gravel path as he returned to the patch of earth marked by his wife's name. Around him, the world felt suspended in gray silence, fragile and uncertain, like new memories waiting to be born. His breath formed brief clouds in the chill air as he knelt, eyes searching the small mound beside the headstone with cautious hope. There, half hidden beneath damp leaves and wild grass, was another note. The paper was worn but legible, the familiar scrawl unfolding like a balm to his spiraling grief. "Still with you, even when silent." The paw print at the bottom, the dog's signature, sparked a flicker deep within him. Skepticism warred with a timid yearning as John reached out, fingers trembling as he picked it up. The world around him sharpened to a fragile clarity. The soft, steady panting of Max blended with the rustling leaves. The sepia-toned light of dawn embraced the grave, bathing it in warmth that refused to be extinguished. John's gaze lifted, drinking in the quiet strength of this place, this momentous small miracle slipping through the cracks of despair. Returning home, the air inside was cooler than the morning's warmth, heavy with the scent of paint and silence. The studio seemed to breathe alongside him, each canvas a fragment of his fractured soul. The note rested on the work table like a beacon, its message an invitation as much as a mystery. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the world yet feeling the stirrings of something that insisted on movement, on life. The unfinished canvas dominated the room. Wild swaths of dark paint clashed with bursts of blue and gold, much like his spiraling thoughts. His fingers itched to pick up the brush, yet hesitation rooted him to the spot. The fragility of hope battled the crushing weight of grief and doubt. Max padded in silently, resting his head on John's feet, a quiet tether. John looked down, meeting the dog's steady eyes, a fractured resolve forming like cracks in ice. "Maybe it's real," John whispered, voice taut with fragile courage. With a tentative breath, he lifted the brush, the bristles grazing the canvas with cautious strokes. Color bled slowly, hesitant yet alive, as if awakening from a long dormancy. Each mark was a small rebellion against the silence, a heartbeat of hope cracked through the dark. The room began to change, muted tones giving way to subtle warmth, the interplay of shadow and light echoing the conflict within. Hours slipped away in whispered conversations between brush and canvas. The note remained in sight, a silent companion on this fragile path. Outside, the sky cleared briefly, revealing shards of blue beneath retreating clouds. A single ray of sunlight pierced the window, a spotlight on the merging shadows and color, a quiet testament to resilience. But beneath the stirring hope lurked uncertainty, unspoken questions and a lingering tension that tightened with each revelation. As John leaned back, breathing heavy, Max whined softly, nudging at his hand. John's eyes met the dog's, searching for answers that words could not voice. The wind outside whispered through the trees, carrying with it haunting echoes of the past, but also the faintest promise of connections unseen yet deeply felt. John's gaze fell again on the note, and deep inside, a stubborn seed of courage took root. The camera lingers on the note resting on the table, as shadows lengthen and the light softens a silent promise that the journey has only just begun. The crisp autumn air carried a sharper edge as John returned to the cemetery, each breath a visible wisp dissolving into the morning mist. The graveyard was quieter than before, cloaked in a settling fog that blurred the edges of gravestones and memories alike. His fists clenched in the pockets of his worn coat, knuckles white with both determination and doubt. The notes he'd found, small, fragile declarations of love, had sparked a fragile hope, but shadows now crept deeper into that hope, casting long, twisting doubts. John knelt beside the gravestone, careful not to disturb the moss that grew thick and wild. Another note, slightly different than the last, lay tucked beneath a flower pot filled with wilting chrysanthemums. The handwriting was less familiar, mere cryptic fragments woven between love and secrecy. He read softly aloud, the words both a balm and a knife. Truth lies beneath, beyond what the eye sees. Forgiveness is the path, but not without pain. His pulse quickened, a tightening in his chest that matched the ache of betrayal whispered between the lines. Why was this secret so heavily guarded? Why had these messages been hidden away in layers, as if the truth were a treasure best kept buried? The soft padding of Max's paws on the grass behind him pulled John back from spiraling thoughts. The dog's eyes, sharp and unwavering, fixed on him with unspoken urgency. "What aren't you telling me, Max?" John whispered, voice breaking. Returning home, the studio weighted its shadows deeper, the canvases cold and accusatory. The unfinished painting of his wife stood like a silent sentinel, its turbulent colors now tainted by the poison of suspicion. John's fingers brushed the note again, tracing the edges as the words replayed in his mind. Later that night, under the dim light of a single lamp, John sifted through his wife's old belongings, letters, journals, photographs, all layered with silence. Among them, he uncovered a diary with her name delicately inscribed on the cover. He hesitated, breath shallow, before flipping it open. The pages revealed fragmented thoughts, moments of regret, veiled confessions hinting at a life he never fully glimpsed. His eyes lingered on a cryptic passage: "I must protect him, even from me." The truth would break him, yet he deserves to find it, when he's ready. A wave of conflicting emotions crashed over him: love, anger, helplessness intertwined. How could the woman he loved be a fortress of secrets? How many layers had he never peeled back, blinded by grief and guilt? The nights grew longer, as anxiety and determination wove a fragile thread through his waking hours. Calls from distant relatives, muted conversations about his wife's past, and whispered rumors stirred unease. Each encounter chipped away at his certainty. Trust became a currency too expensive to afford. One evening, a sharp knock at the door shattered the fragile equilibrium. Standing there was a woman, eyes surveying him with a mix of sorrow and guarded intent. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said quietly, "but you need to know the full story." She planned all this with those notes, the messages. It was her way of guiding you. John's heart seized, a cascade of emotions flooding through: confusion, betrayal, and a raw ache seeking resolution. "Why didn't she tell me herself?" he asked, voice frail. The woman's gaze softened. "Because some truths are easier to hold onto, and some journeys must be taken alone, but not entirely without footsteps to follow." That night, alone, John sat before the unfinished painting. The brush trembled in his hand, the colors bleeding into shadows. His view blurred: grief, hope, fear, all intertwining into a chaotic dance with no clear end. Yet beneath the turmoil stirred a fragile resolve and urgent need to uncover what lay concealed, no matter the cost. The notes were no longer mere messages, they were gateways. Outside, the wind began to howl, rattling panes like an unseen chorus heralding change. The house seemed to breathe around him, waiting. John's gaze hardened, eyes sharp under heavy lids. "I'll follow the signs," he said softly. "Even if it breaks me." The flickering lamplight cast long shadows on the walls, the dance of light and darkness a silent testament to the journey ahead, a path shadowed by secrets, yet warmed by the faint, unyielding glow of love and redemption. The sky hung low, a dull curtain of gray pressing against the windows of John's studio as he sat hunched over the scattered notes she had left, each one a whispered echo of a time when hope seemed possible. Yet now the words carved into paper felt like jagged shards digging into his heart, fragments of trust broken and lies revealed. His fingers trembled as he unfolded yet another letter, its edges brittle, the handwriting unmistakably hers but unfamiliar in its tone. "I arranged everything," it began, the confession unfolding like a slow, unbearable weight. "The notes, the paths, my way of guiding you back, even from beyond." The room seemed to constrict, the air thick with the heavy scent of turpentine and salt tears unshed and the damp from a recent storm that mirrored the turmoil stirring within him. John's breath caught, the veneer of hope cracking wide open to reveal the raw wound beneath. He sank back, the chair creaking under his sudden surrender, eyes unfocused as scenes of their time together flashed, smiles masked in shadows, secrets hidden behind laughter. The unfinished painting loomed ominously, a canvas smeared in sorrow and uncertainty. A knock at the door jerked him back. John's gaze sharpened, heart pounding. A visitor in this solitude was unexpected. Opening the door revealed a woman unfamiliar yet resonant with a somber familiarity, eyes dark and bound with unspoken truths. "You need to know," she said quietly, voice a thread of tension and empathy. "She trusted me to carry this secret until you were ready." John's eyes searched hers, the line between betrayal and belief thinning perilously. "Why me? Why like this?" The woman stepped inside, pulling a small box wrapped in faded velvet from her coat. "Because some truths hold power only when revealed at the right moment. She wanted you to find strength in the journey, even if it meant breaking first." The weight of her words collided with the noise in his mind, a fractured symphony of anger, anguish, and an aching need for closure. John reached for the box, breath shallow. Inside, alongside a single silver lock attached with intertwined lines that resembled a paw print, lay a key. Cold metal gleamed faintly in the lamplight, a tangible symbol of secrets finally made real. As he lifted the key, memories intertwined with new revelations, the notes, the dog's paw print, the unfinished painting, all threads in a tapestry more complex than he had dared to imagine. He sat alone once more, the room heavy with impending truth. The threshold of catharsis loomed, promising both salvation and destruction. Outside, the wind whispered through bare branches, carrying the scent of rain and change. In that restless dusk, John faced the unyielding silence within, aware that the path ahead demanded more than courage. It required surrender. His fingers trembled over the key, the last note of Lydia's secret song. A soft, steady bark echoed in the distance, Max, ever loyal, calling him forward. John's eyes flared with newfound fire, the voice of love and loss converging in one resolute moment. "I'm ready," he whispered, voice raw but steady, to face the truth. The camera lingers on the glistening key in his palm, the fragile light bending and fracturing, mirroring the man himself, broken, yet unbroken, poised on the edge of revelation as the screen fades to black. Rain hammered the windowpanes with ruthless insistence, each cold drop tapping out a relentless dirge that echoed through John's cramped studio. The somber light of a thunderstorm filtered weakly through heavy clouds, casting the room in muted blues and grays, wrapping the space in a thick veil of suffocating solitude. John sat slumped in his chair, the weight of betrayal anchoring him deeper into a sea of silence. His fingers, once steady and sure wielding brushes, now trembled uncontrollably, abandoned beside the canvas that had become an altar to his grief. The painting was unfinished, a turbulent swirl of shadow and light, splattered colors barely hinting at the face he longed to preserve, the memory he struggled to hold. It mocked him as much as it soothed, a mirror reflecting the chaos drowning his soul. The notes, once tender sparks of hope, now burned cold with the raw ache of deception. The revelation that his wife had orchestrated this mysterious correspondence, the dog's note, the whispered promises buried in ink and paw print, cracked the fragile foundations of trust he had labored so desperately to build from the ruins of their shared past. A brittle laugh escaped him, hollow and sharp. "So this was all a game," he muttered, voice ragged and laced with bitter disbelief. The room swallowed his words, offering only the cold drip of water leaking from a nearby ceiling corner, the rhythm steady and merciless. Max lay curled by the worn rug, eyes flickering with quiet concern, but even the dog's presence failed to breach the fortress of despair encasing John's heart. Outside, thunder rumbled low and distant, a ghostly companion to the tempest gathering within. The rain blurred the world beyond the frosted glass, washing away clarity and leaving only a haze of shadows and fractured memories. John's breath caught as he reached instinctively for the fractured letter, the worn edges slippery beneath the weight of trembling hands. Each fold whispered secrets that now felt like chains, binding him to a past both cherished and poisoned. He stared into the empty room, the silence stretching vast and merciless, pressing in until his lungs burned and his heart wrenched. Amidst the swirling storm of emotions, he realized the deepest loss was not of her but of the story he thought they shared. His eyes drifted to the canvas once more, its unfinished face staring back with haunting accusation. The colors bled between shadow and light, a reflection of all that was torn apart inside him. "What now?" he whispered to the ether, voice breaking against the walls that kept his pain captive. The storm outside responded with a fierce flash, a jagged vein of lightning illuminating the room in stark contrast before plunging it back into darkness. For a fleeting heartbeat, the chaos and the silence converged. John slumped further, surrendering beneath the oppressive weight of loss and disillusionment. The dog's paw print on the note seemed distant now, a ghostly emblem of hope fading into the night. As thunder dissolved into rain's steady cadence, the room held its breath with him, a fragile stillness that felt less like peace and more like the edge of unraveling. And there, in that trembling quiet, John found himself adrift, lost between the memory of love and the sharp sting of betrayal, a man becoming unmoored from every anchor that once defined him. The apartment lay cloaked in shadow, the only illumination faint glimmers of moonlight slicing through the cracked blinds, strewing sharp lines of silver across the cluttered floor. John's form was hunched beneath a dim lamp, the flickering bulb casting restless, trembling shadows that danced like phantoms across the walls. The cold seemed to settle deep in the bones of the room, creeping insidiously into every corner and crevice, wrapping his world in an endless winter. He sat motionless at the edge of his worn sofa, his gaze vacant and glassy, staring not at the scattered photographs or the untouched easel, but rather through them, through the veil of memory and pain. His fingers traced absent patterns along the threadbare fabric of the seat, a silent companion to the hollow ache gnawing at his heart. Each breath was a fragile whisper, fragile as the remnants of hope that had once stirred with the notes from the grave, now suffocated beneath the weight of doubt and loneliness. The room breathed with the sighs of a life unraveling. John's eyes flicked toward the canvas, on unfinished testament to love and lost, colors blurred as if weeping along with him. The painting embodied his fractured soul. The vibrant hues of affection seeped into murky shades of sorrow, the brushstrokes uncertain and tentative. The soft padding of Max's paws echoed faintly as the dog nosed closer, seeking to bridge the widening chasm of solitude. John barely registered the presence, his mind adrift in a tempest of questions that spiraled deeper into darkness. Silence engulfed the room, a vast, suffocating silence that pressed cold and oppressive against his ears, broken only by the distant, mournful howl of wind threading through the trees outside. A single crack of thunder fractured the night sky, a stark reminder of the storm raging within him. John's breath caught, a stifled sob threading through the stillness, swallowed by the cavernous emptiness. His hands trembled, reaching out instinctively to the aged frame on the wall, a photograph of his wife smiling under golden afternoon light, vibrant and alive. His fingers brushed the glass, tracing her face with a tenderness that belied his torment. In the quiet, a shard of light caught the polished surface of an old key resting on the mantle, token once nestled within the dog's note, a symbol of secret doors unopened, of paths unexplored. The gleam was both cruel and comforting, a fragile emblem of loss and unrealized promises. John's eyes lingered on the key as the weight of his despair bore down, each heartbeat a hammering echo in the hollow space where hope once resided. "What's left?" he whispered, voice bare and ragged, the question dissolving into the vast dark. His shadow stretched long and distorted against the wall, a fractured silhouette mirroring the fissures within. The night deepened, folding around him like a shroud, as John surrendered to the emptiness, sinking slowly into the abyss where love and loss blurred into quiet oblivion. Outside, the world turned cold and silent, holding its breath with a man lost between the fragments of memory and the crushing weight of an unraveling soul. The bleak light of early evening filtered through the grimy windowpanes of John's studio, casting elongated shadows that stretched across the cluttered floor like silent witnesses to his unraveling. The room was thick with the scent of turpentine and forgotten dreams, the air heavy and still, as if the world itself held its breath. John sat slumped at his work table, the worn dog-eared note clenched loosely in trembling fingers. The inked paw print, the symbol of an impossible connection, felt colder now, a fragile talisman that had transformed into a weight pressing relentlessly upon his soul. He stared blankly at the unfinished canvas standing sentinel against the wall, its chaotic swirls of dark and vibrant hues a mirror to his fractured mind. Outside, the wind sighed through the bare branches of skeletal trees, a soft, haunting lament that whispered through the empty streets and into the recesses of his solitude. The silence inside was shattered only by the low, steady breathing of Max, curled at John's feet, an anchor in the storm of his despair. A sudden flicker in the corner caught John's eye, a small crack in the floorboards beneath the easel, where fragments of dried paint and dust had collected like remnants of a broken past. Instinctively, his fingers brushed against the rough wood, tracing the jagged line as if seeking a secret hidden beneath. His mind wandered to memories of his wife, the warmth of her smile, the light in her eyes contrasted against the shadows now blanketing his world. The realization pierced through his numbness. The notes, the dog's paw print, the unfinished painting, they were not just cryptic messages but invitations to reconcile with a love that transcended absence. In that moment, the studio seemed to exhale, the oppressive weight loosening its grip just enough to let a sliver of hope shine through. John's gaze lifted to the small table near the window, where a photograph of his wife sat framed in delicate silver. He reached out, fingertips hovering before cupping the frame gently, as if to cradle a whispered promise. A soft whimper from Max stirred him further, the dog's eyes meeting his with unwavering loyalty. John swallowed hard, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not ready yet, but I will be." The storm outside softened to a gentle drizzle, the rhythmic patter against the glass a quiet hymn of renewal. For the first time in weeks, the studio felt less like a mausoleum and more like a threshold, subtle light gathering at the edges of shadow. John rose slowly, moving toward the unfinished canvas with cautious reverence. His hands hovered over the brush as the first rays of twilight spilled through the window, illuminating the chaotic strokes in a warm, forgiving glow. A breath escaped his lips, steady and sure. He pressed the brush gently to the canvas, the color blooming beneath his touch like fragile new life. The room held its breath with him, a canvas not just of paint, but of healing. And in that fragile creation, John glimpsed the path ahead, uncertain, winding, but undeniably real. As dusk turned to night, the flickering city lights shimmered beyond, a tapestry of forgotten connections and nascent hope. The unfinished painting, now alive with motion and meaning, was a quiet testament to resilience, a testament that even amidst the deepest despair, the faintest spark of light endures, waiting to be kindled anew. The pale light of dawn spilled through wooden slats, filtering softly into John's studio where dust hovered in thin, golden streams. The room exhaled a quiet warmth after weeks of shadow and silence. He sat motionless before the unfinished canvas, the chaotic strokes of grief beginning to settle into something else, a fragile pattern of meaning, of tentative peace. The weight of the last weeks pressed heavily, but the night's torment had thinned, replaced by a fragile resolve, a gentle pulse beneath the ache. Outside, a robin's delicate call sliced through the thick morning fog, a melody long unheeded but whispering of life beyond absence. John's hands trembled as he reached for the dog's note resting nearby. It was no longer merely a cryptic message but a key to memory and connection, a tether pulling him toward light. His eyes traced the paw print, a silent symbol of loyalty and unseen paths. He rose, stepping to a grimy window and gazing out across the mist-laden graveyard. The gravestone shimmered faintly in the new light, droplets of rain catching the sun's first rays like scattered jewels. It was a small, solemn beacon, both a reminder of loss and a marker of enduring presence. Returning inside, John felt the studio's atmosphere shift. The sharp scent of turpentine softened into something almost like hope, mingling with the faint aroma of rain and earth. His fingers lingered over a half-filled palette where muted colors mingled, hesitant but alive. A subtle burst of color caught his attention on the canvassed cobalt blue of a sky breaking through painted clouds, the first bold ripple against the dark churn. It mirrored his own stirring heart, a promise whispered in pigment. John's lips moved in a quiet murmur, as if speaking to the unseen, to the shadows that had clung to him. Maybe there's still a way. Maybe the story's not finished. He settled before the canvas, brush poised. The first stroke was tentative, a soft caress of paint that blended into the chaos like a dawn breaking over night's edge. The room seemed to breathe with him, the walls absorbing the slow unraveling of grief, tear by patient tear. Outside, the fog lifted lazily, revealing the shifting hues of autumn's embrace, the golden yellows and warm ambers flickering like embers in a dying fire, fragile but resilient. John's eyes sought the photograph of his wife beside the easel. For the first time in months, a flicker of acceptance softened the fierce shadows behind his gaze. The path was uncertain, the wounds raw, but a subtle light had begun to break, painting the edges of possibility. He pressed the brush to canvas with growing confidence, the colors blooming quietly, a reflection of his heart's slow, tentative return. The dog's note remained pinned nearby, a steadfast companion on this fragile journey. A distant church bell tolled, its clear resonance weaving through the morning stillness, a sound both mournful and hopeful. John inhaled deeply, the cool air tasting of rain and renewal. In the silence that followed, he realized the truth: change was possible. Not sudden or complete, but a slow, trembling emergence from the darkness. The studio was no longer a tomb. It was a sanctuary, one split between shadow and the faintest promise of dawn. John's fingers curved around the brush, ready for the next stroke, the next step. And in that barely lit room, the first strands of healing unfurled, fragile and bright, a whispered oath that life, in all its messy grace, would find a way. The air was brisk, tinged with the scent of wet earth and spring's tentative bloom as John approached the cemetery once more. The path beneath his worn boots was softened by the recent rain, the gravel gleaming as droplets caught the pale morning light. He clutched the key discovered hidden in the piano, its cold weight grounding him, a symbol heavier now with meaning and resolve. The gravestone sat bathed in quiet sunlight, the fresh flowers arranged beneath it nodding with the breath of wind. John knelt, his movement deliberate, the tension in his shoulders like taut canvas strings ready to snap. The dog, Max, sat silently at his side, eyes steady, a constant presence in the shifting landscape of his life. John reached carefully into a crevice near the stone's base, the soil damp and cool beneath his fingers. The key fit smoothly into a narrow lock hidden within the Marblean entrance, not to riches, but to secrets. Sliding open the small compartment, John's pulse quickened. Inside lay a bundle of letters and photographs, delicate with age. He lifted them with reverence, each image a frozen moment of laughter, love, and a shared past he thought lost forever. His breath hitched as he recognized the handwriting on the letter, she's wife's, but in an unfamiliar hand. The correspondence revealed the deliberate orchestration of the notes, a carefully crafted path intended to guide him back from the consuming shadows of grief. John's fingers trembled over a letter signed with a simple message, "I love you always." At that moment, the serenity of the cemetery was broken by the cautious steps of a woman approaching, her eyes haunted yet compassionate. She spoke softly. "I helped her with the notes. She wanted you to find them when you were ready." John's gaze met hers, filled with questions burning sharp as the morning light. "Why didn't she tell me herself?" The woman's expression faltered. "Because some truths need time. Because love sometimes speaks in silence and small signs." The air between them was tense, a fragile truce beneath the sprawling sky. John nodded slowly, the burden on his shoulders tempered by a fragile understanding. Back in his studio, John laid the letters on his work table, surrounded by brushes and the half-finished portrait that once throbbed with pain but now flickered with tentative hope. His dog settled at his feet, a slow, steady presence anchoring him to this new moment. John lifted his paintbrush, the bristles catching light as he mixed colors, a palette shifting from shadowed blues toward gentle golds. Each stroke became a quiet act of defiance, an embrace of healing. The studio seemed to breathe with renewed energy, the walls echoing the rhythm of transformation. As dusk settled, the window glowed softly with the fading sun, casting fractured light over the canvas, a symbolic dance of darkness and grace. John paused, brush poised, eyes shimmering with a glimmer of clarity. "Not all shadows hide endings," he murmured, "some hide the promise of dawn." Max raised his head, ears alert, sensing the fragile shift in the air. Outside, the sky unfolded vast and luminous, the stars appearing like distant beacons, a silent chorus guiding a man reborn. The key, the notes, the love, it was all beginning to weave together in a tapestry more intricate and beautiful than grief alone. John took a breath, steady and resolute, as the first lines of a new day stretched across the horizon. The attic was suffused with a light that no longer felt fragile but alive, pulsing softly like a heart reborn. Dust motes floated in the air, catching the golden glow streaming through the small, cracked window, turning the neglected space into a cathedral of light and shadow. John stood still, breaths even and steady, his body no longer weighed by the heavy cloak of grief that had suffocated him for months. This was no longer the man lost in sorrow and secrets, but one forged anew, hardened by pain yet softened by understanding. His paint-stained sweater, once a symbol of chaos, now seemed a badge of battles fought and wisdom gained. A faint smile brushed the edges of his lips as memories flickered through his mind, the tapestry of past and present weaving a new narrative. On the floor lay the scattered notes, those enigmatic fragments that had once pierced his heart with confusion and betrayal. Now, they resonated as a symphony of love and resilience, the hidden truth that had led him back to himself. They were no longer mysteries but stepping stones across a ravaged landscape towards healing. He stepped forward, eyes drawn instinctively to the unfinished painting propped against the wall. The canvas shimmered under the warm light, the dark turbulent strokes giving way to bursts of vibrant waistcobalt blues melting into blazing oranges, shadow receding to light. Each brushstroke told a story of transformation, of despair transmuted into hope. Fingers grazing the canvas, John whispered the name that had become both scar and sanctuary. "Emma." The echo of his voice seemed to rouse the attic itself, walls creaking as if in solemn recognition. The dog's paw print, a motif threaded through the notes and his art, appeared faintly in the corner of the canvas, a silent witness to love's enduring imprint. John breathed deeply, savoring the shifting air heavy with renewal. He turned slowly towards the dim staircase leading back down, the path to confrontation and truth stretching out before him steadier, clearer than ever. "I'm ready," he said softly but firmly, voice carrying the weight of unshakable purpose. Below, the house waited, both familiar and strange, its secrets poised to unravel under the light of hard-earned courage. The scattered shadows in the corners softened. A subtle warmth crept into the air, as if the house itself exhaled a sigh of relief. From the window, the first stars pierced the gathering dusk, cold and brilliant, an eternal testament to resilience in the black velvet sky. John's gaze lifted to them, serenity settling deep within. In this sacred stillness, the man who had walked through darkness now stood at the threshold of renewal, steadfast, courageous, and whole. The camera pulls back, the attic bathed in radiant light, as John descends the stairs, each step a quiet hymn to healing, each breath a promise fulfilled. And beneath the sheltering night, the journey toward truth and reconciliation reached its turning point. The story of love, loss, and unseen connections poised to unfold beyond the shadows, into the waiting dawn. The morning light spilled gently through the opened window, casting a warm, golden hue across the studio, illuminating the dust motes swirling like tiny, luminous dancers. John sat quietly at his easel, the canvas in front of him now mostly complete, an exquisite portrait of his wife, captured with brushstrokes that radiated both reverence and serenity. The colors were softly blended, the chaotic storm of grief giving way to a tender harmony he had struggled so long to find. His hand relaxed, the brush slipping from his grasp as he took in the scene, a testament to love's endurance and transformation. In the stillness, he felt a whisper of peace settle within, as if the universe itself had conspired to craft this moment of quiet finality. Around him, the studio was imbued with an almost sacred stillness, the walls echoing with memories of both sorrow and hope. The unfinished painting, once a symbol of chaos, now shimmered with a gentle glow, its vibrant hues merging into a luminous tapestry of reconciliation. The notes, the paw print, and the secret truths that had once threatened to break him apart all now shimmered softly in his mind as fragments of a puzzle finally fitting into place. He reached out, fingertips lightly stroking the edge of the canvas, the textures beneath his touch echoing the journey: pain, doubt, betrayal, and ultimately, healing. The wounds they'd carried had transformed into a mosaic of enduring love, each piece more beautiful and fragile than he had believed possible. A faint smile touched his lips as he looked at the portrait, the woman whose love had broken his silence, whose secrets had unraveled, and yet, whose essence now filled his heart with peace. The storm that had raged inside him had finally begun to calm. In quiet reflection, he turned to the window, watching the morning sun scatter its rays across the tranquil garden, an oasis that seemed to whisper promises of rebirth, of unfinished stories now gently closed. John's gaze fell upon the small, worn letter resting on the nearby tablet, a final, sacred relic of their shared tumult and love. He picked it up, the paper soft and faded but alive with memories. The words, once cryptic and confusing, now rang with clarity. Love endures through shadows and light, through silence and storm. The breeze gently fluttered the curtains, carrying a scent of blooming jasmine and fresh earth, filling the space with a sense of infinite continuity. As he folded the letter carefully, a profound sense of acceptance washed over him, an understanding that love was not lost but woven into the very fabric of existence. With deliberate calm, John stepped away from the easel, a quiet, unshakable resolve settling into his soul. He had crossed the threshold from reflection to acceptance, the fragile, luminous truth that peace lay not in forgetting the past but in embracing it with an open heart. The camera slowly pulled back, capturing the studio bathed in radiant light, a symbol of hope reborn amid the ruins. The last lingering shot was of the portrait, a masterpiece of healing and trust, beautiful, complete, and eternal. The room was hushed, bathed in a warm, amber glow that seemed to breathe life into the shadows of the evening. John sat before the easel, the canvas now transformed into a living testament, a portrait of his wife, luminous and full of quiet grace. The brushstrokes, once hesitant and chaotic, had found their rhythm, flowing naturally, each color blending into a symphony of healing. He moved slowly, his hands steady but soft, as if revering the fragile miracle unfolding beneath his fingertips. Every line and hue was a prayer of forgiveness, a testament to love's resilience in the face of betrayal and doubt. Around him, the studio felt more like a sanctuary, walls whispering of hope rather than loss. The chaotic years of confusion and despair had settled into a gentle calm, the storm inside him now abated. The unfinished painting of chaos had been reborn as a masterpiece of peace, a mirror of the transformation in his heart. He gazed at her face, so familiar, yet newly alive in every brushstroke, her smile conveying 1,000 stories of love, sacrifice, and enduring hope. The notes, the secrets, the unspoken truths they had spun together, they all wove into this serene image, an echo of their journey, captured in colors. His eyes shimmered with tears, not of sorrow but of acceptance and gratitude. The grief that once clung like a shroud was lifting, replaced by a profound sense of closure. The past, with all its shadows and secrets, had finally found its place not as a burden, but as part of a greater story woven into the fabric of love. As he set the brush down, he gently brushed his fingers across the painting's surface, whispering softly, "We're finally free." The words carried through the quiet, a vow carved into the silence. Outside, the sky blushed with the last hints of sunset, the world basking in a golden calm. The garden beyond the window shimmered, the overgrown vines now tender with new growth, flowers reaching upward like hopes revived. John caressed his wife's image in quiet reverence, feeling her presence not as absence but as an indelible part of him. Dreamlike, he saw her smile once more, a gentle reassurance that love had indeed conquered all fractured fragments. In that luminous moment, the studio was filled with a sense of sacred peace, a stillness that enfolded him like a warm embrace. The journey through darkness had come to an end, and in its place grew the quiet certainty. Healing, forgiveness, and love had woven anew the story that death could never truly sever. He sat back in his chair, eyes closed, breath even and deep. The last light faded into a serene dusk, and the canvas gleamed softly, a testament to the unbreakable bond that endured beyond time, beyond loss. The scene paused in tranquil harmony, a silent crown of hope resting upon the soul of a man finally at peace. The room was bathed in the soft glow of dawn, a tranquil warmth spilling through the window and bathing the space in gentle amber light. The newly finished portrait of his wife hung prominently, a masterpiece rooted in love and forgiveness. The brushstrokes shimmered with a quiet brilliance, colors vibrant and alive, capturing not just her likeness but the enduring spirit of their love. John moved slowly, the sense of peace settling deep within him as if it had been a long, winding path home. His hand lingered on the portrait's frame, fingers tracing the delicate lines that seemed to glow with life. The room was silent but for the faint hum of morning birds singing in the garden, leaves whispering in the breeze, the gentle pulse of a new beginning. He walked to the window, standing still for a moment, gazing out over the garden where wildflowers bloomed freely, daisies, poppies, and thistles surrounded by the thriving vines and the overgrown earth, now alive and unrestrained. It was nature's testament to resiliency, a symbol of renewal after seasons of heartbreak. A soft smile touched his lips as he turned back to the room, now transformed into a sanctuary of hope. The shadows of grief had receded, replaced by an understanding that love's true power lay in its ability to transcend loss and heal wounds buried deep under years of silence. He moved to the piano, an elegant, aged instrument waiting patiently in the corner. His fingers brushed across the keys, feeling their cool, familiar texture. With a tender, deliberate touch, he began to play a gentle melody that echoed softly, a lullaby of peace and reconciliation. Notes drifted into the awakening room, each one a whisper of love eternal. Outside, the sunlight expanded its reach, illuminating the dewy grass and shimmering leaves, painting the world anew in profound, silent beauty. The portrait of his wife seemed to come alive, capturing her smile, a final gift of closure, ready to be shared with the universe. As the music flowed, John's gaze softened, eyes moist but shining with tranquility. The journey of grief had brought him through darkness, but now, surrounded by the symbols of love and transformation, he understood the universe's quiet truth. Love endures beyond pain, beyond loss, beyond silence. He lowered his hands, the last note lingering like a breath held in wonder. Turning back to the portrait, he bowed his head gently. In that quiet moment, he finally felt at peace, a soul reborn from the depths of sorrow into the boundless promise of dawn, forever linked by unseen, unbreakable threads of love. How would you honor such a message? Share your story below.